Hi, my name is Cynthia Trigueros.
My name's Amanda Torres,
And I'm Angel Banda.
and this is our podcast for Benjamin Franklin, An American Life by Walter Isaacson.
Okay, guys. So, what did you guys think about Benjamin Franklin and American Life? I thought that, from what I read, that it was a pretty cool read. Just Walter Isaacson, the author, obviously, he seemed a little biased for Benjamin Franklin. What do you think, Amanda?
Well, I think Isaacson wasn't that biased. I feel like he did mention other stuff of his life, not just the positives. There was also the negatives with his family struggles, how he didn't want to be close to them. And he also mentioned some of his enemies, like Adams. And I actually liked reading this book. It was interesting. I got emotionally affected by it, especially in the end when Franklin died. I kind of shed a tear. What about you, Cynthia?
I think both of you guys are very wrong because I feel like Isaacson really criticized Franklin. He included a lot of his faults. He even talked about how he was unfaithful to his wife romantically, and I think that was a pretty bad thing. It got me a little mad because the part where I was reading that he knew his wife had a stroke, and he was still in England, and he didn't go back to see her. Like he knew that she was probably going to die, and he was never going to see her again, and yet she died, and he never even saw her. That got me really mad.
But there's also the point that back then they didn't have like text messages or emails. Like he was from like a different country, like across the like away from the ocean. And how is he supposed to know if she's like so far? Of course, he's not gonna know like right away.
But he knew, and then knowing that his wife had a stroke and everything, and he was still fooling around with these women in France and flirting with them, like that's a really bad husband.
That also brings up another point. There was a part in the book where he was talking with an 11-year-old, I think, right? And that actually got me a little mad also because he was like almost flirting with an 11-year-old, and that seemed verging on the on
Well, her name was Kitty, but she was into older men, and that's why Franklin was like taking advantage of that. Even though he offered her a nice husband, she was like, "No, I'm into older men."
Well, hold on, you guys. Let's just step away from this topic of pedophilia. Let's focus more on his accomplishments, on the American dream.
All right, so this was around the colonial era when religious prosecution was being held in European countries, and many European people started migrating to the colonies and started taking simple jobs like making candles from animal fat, such as Franklin's parents, like Josiah and Anne Franklin. And then this is when Franklin was born. Benjamin Franklin was born in Boston.
Okay, and his childhood actually brings a very interesting point. Do you guys think that if he would have gotten an education at Harvard, he would have made so many accomplishments throughout his life and contributed much to America?
Yeah, let's remember that Benjamin was a young adolescent at this time, and the reason that it says in the book, Josiah believed that Benjamin was not ready to go to Harvard because he was skeptical and he thought he was very mature.
although he wasn't encouraged or allowed to go to Harvard, he still helped create the American dream as we know now, as we see now, in a lot of ways. Like any other great inventor or great man, he he had a lot of failures, like the stove, like his stove, or the harmonica that which was sold really well in Europe, but it also led to lead poisoning.
For a 17-year-old runaway from to Pennsylvania, he did pretty well in his life. Like, let's not forget, he started as a little printing press boy, and then he started making his new newspaper called the Gazette, which was very famous in Pennsylvania. And then he even started his own organization, the Junto, which helped create fire and policemen organizations.
Okay, Amanda, like that's true. He did help develop that, but those don't even come close to some of his bigger accomplishments, like his work with the electric battery or his work with lightning rods, which saves hundreds of lives a year, and his group Juntos, development of the library.
Also, his creation of the Albany Plan of Union, even though it failed, it was the first attempt for American unification, and it also created America's first political cartoon, which was the Join or Die with the snake.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned political affairs because Franklin was actually a great political contribution towards America. As a representative of America in Parliament, he spent a great deal of his life in Europe and actually never went home until much later. Um, Although he did do some major things in Europe, we also have to take notice that he um he really did fool around a lot in Europe, and although he did contribute a lot to American affairs, we have, for example, John Adams. When he visited him, he took notice of the fact that Benjamin didn't really go to church, and he was really social. He spent most of his day going out to lunch with his friends or receiving visitors, and never really did any political affairs until late at night, and then he would wake up in the morning and repeat the same process over again.
Yeah, Franklin was more practical rather than religious. It wasn't until late in his life, when he was around um his death, that he started becoming religious, because in the book it says that he wanted to feel good instead of sick. Yeah, I know that sounds kind of dumb, but I'm just gonna say, like, if you're gonna die at some point, I would prefer being happy. Okay. Back to political. Benjamin at first was not politically supportive of America. He was mostly toward Europeans, such as when the taxation acts were imposed on the colonies. He didn't actually mind, but he did feel like Americans did need some representation.
Don't you think it's a little ironic, Amanda, that he wanted Americans to be free, but he had over 200 slaves?
Yeah, and it was funny that he was against slavery, but like he still had slaves. Yeah, I believe Franklin was a great man indeed. He did inspire the idea of a middle class in America. He also helped ideas of equality with anti-slavery, and his political views were more practical than religious.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much all the time we have left for this week. Tune in next week, guys.
And that's how the cookie crumbles.